Right now, tackling grief, we're going to hear from first responders who work to save lives but also face tragedy. Plus, is anyone safe? The federal agencies who could face the next round of mass layoffs. And we're going to take you inside of one Atlanta restaurant that's giving a momentum boost to future top chefs. This is The Take. Hello and welcome, I'm Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines to look at how stories are impacting you and your community. We begin this Friday with the lingering cold temperatures wrapping up this work week. Oh my gosh, it is freezing on the outside. We started out with temperatures in the teens, near 20 degrees right here in the city of Atlanta. And when you factor in the little bit of wind that we had, light winds, for example, it felt like the single digits out there. Very, very cold, folks. We're going to see the temperature start to cool off. And I'm saying cool off because we started out very chilly, but we'll cool up, if you will, to around 46 degrees for an afternoon high. Winds will get lighter this afternoon, so it will feel much better than yesterday, where we were in the 30s, of course. You can see over the weekend, we'll start to mild it up some more and getting back into the 50s, 60s as we move into next week. And boy, will that feel like summer to us compared to where we are this morning. Layer up, folks, if you're going out this morning, and stay layered up if you're going to be out and about this afternoon, and enjoy your weekend. All right, Atlanta is seeing a boom in the hospitality industry, but some who are looking for a break to break inside the fine dining space may find it a little tough. One restaurant is looking to help people build that momentum and become a top flight chef. 11Alive's my colleague Cheryl Preheim joins us now on The Take. Welcome to The Take, Cheryl.
Hey, it's so good to be here, Chesley.
It's good to have you on here. You've talked to some folks about this place called the Cafe Momentum.
Yeah, it's such a unique opportunity, Chesley. It's such a cool idea. It's amazing food, great experience, but more than anything, it's really changing lives. It takes kids who were part of the justice system and empowers them. And then these kids, Chesley, they actually run the restaurant, so it invests in their potential.
So take us inside a little bit. The program, is it only for kids, or is it for, who's it for?
Yeah, so right now they're working with 15 to 19-year-olds. They're recruiting kids through maybe probation programs or juvenile detention centers, and it's actually a big number of kids. The Justice Department shows that in Georgia we have about 1,000 kids who are part of this juvenile justice program. So Cafe Momentum, which is a nonprofit, recruits these kids. Now it's interesting, Chesley, because the gentleman who's the executive director, he worked as a counselor at a detention center early in his career, and he saw these kids with great potential but needed someone to invest in them, because he said educational programs are the key for them to really have this like springboard to make a different choice, but needing the, the being equipped to do it. So what they do, Chesley, they give them a paid internship for a whole year. They make more money as they move up. Then they get a white chef's jacket at the end, and then they get placed into a job. So if they want this to be a career, they can do it.
So I also understand they learn more than just about cooking, right? An amazing meal. They learn some life lessons, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, they learn to cook. I mean, to really cook like fine dining. But then they're interacting with their coworkers and customers. They work on networking skills and really management skills. So all things that they can take into really any job they'd want to pursue down the line.
I wonder, is it something that folks or kids are at least wanting to be a part of? I talk to kids. You go to schools, we always talk to kids. It's rare that you hear most kids talk about being chefs. Is that something that's coming on?
You know, it's really interesting. It's part of the reason why Cafe Momentum's actually going into these offices and detention centers, just to say, hey, have you ever thought about this? And here's why it could be interesting, and here's your earning potential, that you can do something really fun that's always changing. There's a lot of energy around it. You know, the food scene's so big here in Atlanta. And then just kind of casting a vision for them that this is exciting. You do have a lot of chance to be promoted, and you can make good money. We'll train you, we'll help you get a job. So at a very young age, it can really launch them into what could be a lucrative and lifelong career.
So I understand tonight at 11 you're going to be introducing us to one of these up-and-coming young chefs.
Yeah, Kai. He's awesome. He's so talented, and it's amazing because in 4 months, he said, 4 months ago, I felt pretty hopeless. I felt stuck. I had no idea what I was going to do or what I wanted to do. 4 months into this program, he's on fire. He loves it. He feels like he's got a path to his future, and he's equipped to do it. And you'll meet Kai. We'll take you inside the restaurant. And Chesley, it's really part of a bigger series called Better Work, because all over the city there are these industries that really need people, skilled workers, and so there's programs that help people get the training they need for free so that they can move into not just a job but really a career. So it could be construction, healthcare, tech, HVAC, plumbing, education, you name it. There are all these treasures in the city that say, if you come, we'll train you and then we'll help you get into a job where you could really make a great living for you and your family.
It's a good thing that you're doing, Cheryl. I appreciate it, but we're going to have to add meteorology to that.
Oh, yeah, please.
Somebody's got to take this job, at some point.
No one can replace you, Chesley. It's got to be you.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Parents and students say they are disappointed that 2 elementary schools are closing. Fulton County School Board voted 4-3 last night to shut down Spalding Drive and Park Lane Elementary. Park Lane is located in East Point and Spalding Drive is located in Sandy Springs. The board says low enrollment and aging buildings drove them to that decision. There is still uncertainty over the circumstances of the departure of DeKalb County's police chief. Mirtha Ramos said in a statement she is leaving after 5 years, but the county says Ramos is on paid administrative leave. Ramos is the first woman to lead that department. Her departure came the same day the county announced new recruiting initiatives as the DeKalb County Police Department faces shortages of over 300 officers. Wow. Saturday marks 1 year since 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley was killed while jogging on UGA's campus in Athens. 26-year-old Jose Ibarra is serving life in prison without parole for her murder. Riley's death led to a national debate over immigration as federal officers say Ibarra entered the U.S. illegally in 2022. Earlier this year, President Donald Trump signed the Laken Riley Act into law. It requires detention of unauthorized immigrants accused of theft and violent crimes. Stay with us. This is The Take. All right, this morning, President Trump's self-proclaimed Department of Government Efficiency is expanding its reach. Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is NBC correspondent Jay Gray, in for Alice Barr this morning. Jay, welcome to the show.
Chesley, great to be here. Thanks a lot.
Hey, look, Jay, at this point, it seems like no job as far as the federal government is concerned is safe. All signs are pointing to the Defense Department being on the chopping block next today. Is that right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It looks like that the Defense Department will be the next to take cuts, and that could mean as many as 55,000 civilian employees at the DOD could lose their jobs, and those firings could begin as early as today. I should also point out 2 sources at the Housing and Urban Development Agency say that they expect widespread cuts to their agency. As many as half of HUD's 9,000 or so employees could lose their jobs. Cuts continuing at the IRS, with many at the agency worried about what that could mean as we get to tax filing season. So a lot going on as far as cuts and reorganization.
All right, Jay. Overnight, we learned that President Trump is considering absorbing the U.S. Postal Service. How would that even work, and what does that mean for mail across the United States?
Yeah, and the post office has had its problems. It hasn't made any money over several years, and it's been problematic as far as working things out. But there's no clear indication of how residential deliveries and trillions of dollars in e-commerce transactions might be rerouted, how the system would be maintained, and it's really all just coming to the surface. The Postmaster General announced early this week he was stepping down from his post overnight. The Washington Post reporting President Trump is considering dissolving the leadership of the post office, which has been independent since it was created 250 years ago. He would then absorb that agency into his Commerce Department.
I wonder how that would work. All right. Well, Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp and the president have not always been on the same page, Jay, as you know, and it seems like they're on friendly terms now. Kemp, who is the chairman of the Republican Governors Association, introduced Trump as the GOP governors met last night in D.C. During that gathering, Trump mentioned that the Department of Education could be next in the crosshairs. What do you know? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he said during that speech that he thought the Department of Education could provide more than $1 trillion in cuts, though it's not clear where that may come from. As for Governor Kemp and the president, as you talked about, they've had a complicated relationship over the years. The president highly critical of the governor after he certified election results in 2020. Trump narrowly losing Georgia while falsely claiming that election was rigged. The two apparently, though, did reconcile before the 2024 campaign and were all smiles together last night. The president saying, and I'm quoting here, "He was fantastic. We won Georgia by a lot."
All right, Jay, really appreciate you giving us all that. I got one more question for you. I know you were down in New Orleans as my Philadelphia Eagles, blasted the Kansas City Chiefs. Were you impressed by that win, that performance, Jay?
I'm going to tell you, I was thoroughly impressed. I've been lucky enough, Chelsea, to be at several Super Bowls, but I don't think I've seen a beating like that. And what concerns me, as not an Eagles fan, is the idea that they're young and just getting better. I think this team is built for the long haul. And yeah, you've got to be still on cloud nine after seeing the Eagles finally cross that threshold, get another Super Bowl under their belts. And again, I'm worried that we may see the Eagles in the Super Bowl for a long time to come.
Hey, save room for me, Jay, when you go down there. I may be standing next to you, especially if the Eagles go again.
Come on, let's go. Let's go.
Thanks a lot. Jay Gray from Washington, D.C. Really appreciate your reporting.
Thanks, Chesley.
All right. It is cold around here, like I'm sure it's cold in D.C. where Jay Gray is. Take a look at the 7-day outlook. It shows the temperatures today started out in the 20s. Yeah, we'll warm up to about 46 if you want to call that a warm up. I'll call it cool this afternoon under mostly sunny skies. We will warm up a little bit as we head into the upcoming weekend and next week as well. And yes, when it comes to cold, we got to deal with the snow. Yeah, and again, in North Georgia this week, we had some snow up there. That makes it quite a challenge for road crews. Joining us now is Natalie Dale with the Georgia Department of Transportation. Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thanks. Well, hey, what's cold is talking about the Eagles and the Super Bowl. I'm going to talk about when the Falcons are getting back to the Super Bowl.
They'll get there one day. They'll get there one day. Again, I mean, they've been there, but they'll get there one day and win it. You guys always keep an eye on the forecast, which we appreciate. Of course, we work hand in hand a lot of times. At what point, when you look at the forecast, do you guys decide to start preparing those roads?
So we, of course, as you know, work very closely with yourself, with the National Weather Service, with the meteorologist over at GMA, to get an outlook far in advance. And far in advance is at least a week ahead of these storm systems to really look at what the storm system will bring, what the road temperatures are, what precipitation is coming, and that very much directs what our treatment in this situation would be. For instance, we had that snow in North Georgia yesterday, but any threat in the metro area we knew was not going to materialize for a couple of reasons. We knew talking to you that we weren't going to get the type of precipitation we needed, but we also knew we were coming off of very warm roads. So we take things like road temperature into account when we're looking at it. Next week, we're going to get up into the 70s. That's amazing. That's going to warm our roads up. But certainly we want everyone to stay weather aware because March has been known to bring some things. Late February and March has been known to bring some winter systems. So we've got our eye on it.
When it comes to preparing roads, we know you face challenges. Is there anything that we could do to help you out in that regard as folks that drive along the roads?
Well, I'm going to say it every time. And I find that about 50-50 of the time people listen to us, which is you have to, when we ask for the public to stay off the road, you really have to take that warning into account, both before, during, and after the storm. We forget that there's 3 very important phases. Before the storm, our brine trucks are out there. They're working hard to get that brine down on tens of hundreds of thousands of lane miles. In the last storm system we had several weeks ago, we treated the amount of lane miles that was the equivalent of treating 2 lanes from New York to LA. So we've got a lot of ground to cover here in Georgia when we have big events. During the storm, obviously, we don't want you out while the precipitation's falling. Then after the storm is when our plow trucks get out, if the type of material on the road necessitates it. So our crews still need time. Atlanta is certainly the city where we have a lot going on, and we find that people have a really hard time staying off the road. So if there is one thing that I could wave my magic wand and get sort of compliance with, it's that people understand that we need them to stay off the road for our safety and to keep traffic moving for our crews, not necessarily for everyone just getting out and about.
Right. I'm going to work on getting you that wand. I think you really need that wand.
Thank you.
You know, whenever we mention snow in the forecast, everybody starts thinking about Snowmageddon, right? Everybody. And I'm sure you guys get the same thing as we get from that. What lessons did GDOT learn when we had that big storm?
Well, I've been at GDOT for a very long time, so I worked Snowmageddon. And so it's, you know, we don't want to forget Snowmageddon. People always say, oh, y'all must, you know, it must just live in the back of your memory. It must give you PTSD. We don't want to forget it. Mm-hmm. We learned so many lessons. The governor at the time, Governor Deal, created the Winter Weather Task Force, where meteorologists like yourself, mm-hmm. GDOT, GMA, private businesses, different companies, different state entities like forestry, anyone who had a role in winter weather came to the table and said, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And I think you've seen over the past 11 years the success of what came out of Snowmageddon. We learned lessons. Things were put into practice. Our brine facilities, we have hundreds of millions of gallons of brine statewide. We move our crews more nimbly than we did. We have more people, more materials, more manpower, more technology. We talk about looking at the road temperatures. If the road temperatures are 50 degrees, it doesn't really matter all that much what's falling from the sky. It's not going to stick. Mm-hmm. And so we have more ability to make the best decisions with the increased materials we have. So we don't want to forget Snowmageddon. No, Absolutely. It wasn't pleasant, but we learned lessons, and we want to continue to learn lessons. Absolutely.
And before I let you go, I have to ask you, are there any big construction projects that we need to know about this weekend that we should stay away from?
Well, you know, one of the nice things about winter, aside from snowstorms, is that you don't see as many lane closures. Summers really are big construction time because of temperatures. Mm-hmm. When you get into 18 degrees outside, it's hard for, you know, there are materials that don't set at lower temperatures. And so it prevents some of our contractors from doing some level of work. So we don't have any big lane closures this weekend. That's great. Of course, we're still very busy on the east side at the I-20, I-285 interchange project. That's going to be ongoing into 2026. But the best thing you can do when you get in your car, check out 511, check out your traffic apps. Don't ever go blind into, and certainly with your eyes open, but don't ever just sort of get in your car and have that automatic commute. Always check your wayfinding apps. Check 511, because what might be a typically clear route might have a lane closure for an emergency reason. There might be a crash. So use all the tools at your disposal to make sure that you know before you go, and give yourself plenty of time. We don't need rush drivers. We don't need speeding, and certainly buckle up, put your phone down.
All right, sounds good. Natalie Dale with GDOT and a Falcon fan. Thanks for joining us on The Take. Really
Falcons
appreciate
fan,
it.
big time.
Yes, indeed. Go Falcons, right? They'll do it this year. They'll do it. All right, thanks a lot.
It's going to be this year. I feel it.
Yeah, so do I. All right, thanks a lot, Natalie. Appreciate it. Plenty more stories for you to come. This is The Take on 11Alive Plus. Welcome back. We're learning more about the tragic moments that claimed the lives of 3 young children ages 4, 1, and 9 months. They died in an apartment fire on Fairburn Road in Atlanta on Wednesday. Firefighters found heavy smoke coming from the second floor when they arrived. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Cases like this can be very hard as a viewer, hard for us as journalists to dissect, even harder for first responders trying to save lives. Joining us now is Andre Holmes with the Atlanta Fire Rescue. Andre, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You've probably been a firefighter. I don't know how long you've been a firefighter, but you've probably seen situations like this. How tough is it to deal with?
I've been on for 11 years, and these things are tragic. And I'm so glad the fire service has changed in terms of we are guided by tradition, and kind of the old schoolers or some of my veteran firefighters would often say things like, you know, this is a dangerous job and you're going to see some things, kind of like man up, suck it up, and kind of our job is to bring order in crisis. And we now are in a time where, because of the increased spotlight on mental health and the research that has shown the way that traumatic events affect all of us, we now do things like critical debriefings where there's support, where psychologists come in and talk to us after we actually go on a very traumatic call. And so the culture of the fire service is moving more toward a recognition that mental health services and support is needed for our first responders.
You said you've been a firefighter for 11 years, so was that a part of your training, or is that something new, a new initiative that's now being done?
No, I would say it's been, probably the last 10, 15 years, there's been a much more robust amplification of the support services to first responders, mental health just being one of them. There's also now support for cancer support and initiatives, such as a statewide cancer assistance fund that was established a few years ago. So this isn't anything that is new, but it is in terms of the history of the fire service, because it's over 200 years old in this country.
Right.
Like, this is kind of a new development in terms of how the culture is shifting.
Do you feel like enough is being done to help first responders respond or deal with the grief?
Yes, I believe I can speak for myself in terms of when I graduated from rookie school and got into my first station, which was in Midtown. I remember, and this was back in 2014, one of the first traumatic incidents I went on, there was a middle-aged man who had committed suicide. And the way that he did it was that he developed a system where he jumped off of one of the bridges in one of the parks. And when we got to the scene, his head was literally separated from his body, and it was on one side of the area, and then the body was in another part of the area. And one of my jobs was to do crowd control at the scene, because it was preventing, there was like an entryway that people could access the park into, and we kind of closed that section down. But I just remember that was the first time that I found myself utilizing the employment assistance program. After they did the debriefing, they had asked if any members wanted to talk to any, have a one-on-one session. Yeah. And I took advantage of that assistance, and it really helped me to kind of get some things off of my mind that were kind of, because suicide's always tough, because you're wondering, what would lead a person to do this? What was the story of this person? But then for my own self, recognizing that I was going to see this wouldn't be my first time doing this, that I had to develop some tools on how I could, for my own self, relieve the stress, understand the dangers of the job, but also still perform and be productive. And I did gain those tools in those sessions.
Yeah, well, Henri, we want to thank you for all that you do, and your colleagues as well. We know that you have to deal with grief, and thank you for the way you handle it. I'm sure you're going to pass that down to young firefighters and as you go along. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be back with my final thoughts coming up. All right, before we go, my final take here. You may or may not be familiar with the name Victor Wembanyama. The 7'3", 21-year-old center for the San Antonio Spurs is quickly becoming the face of the NBA. Yeah, he would likely have been the Defensive Player of the Year, but that all came to an end yesterday when the Spurs pulled him out of the rest of the season because he has a blood clot in his shoulder. Blood clots are not to be something to be played with, folks. They could end your career, just like Georgia Tech alum Chris Bosh. The Spurs, got to give it to him, right? Putting the young man before winning games. Got to be one of the best things I've heard this week. Hopefully he recovers soon. Here is your moment of Zen as we say goodbye.